The smell was not of blood. It was the clean, sharp scent of sheared metal and the acrid burn of fried circuitry. A smell of finality. Glass dust, fine as powdered sugar, coated her tongue. Her left hand was pinned, the pressure a deep and intimate ache that seemed to originate in the bone itself. There was a sound, a single, rhythmic tick from the ruined dashboard, a mechanical heartbeat counting down to nothing. The rain fell on the bent roof of the sedan, a soft, indifferent drumming against the violence of the stillness inside. She had spent 14 days learning the exact cadence of his breathing as he slept, and this sound was nothing like it. Not a life, not a death. An error message. Through the fractured web of the windshield, the city lights of Seoul blurred into watercolor streaks, beautiful and cold, and a universe away. Her head was turned to the side, cheek pressed against the pebbled texture of the deployed airbag, which smelled faintly of industrial chemicals and something like cornstarch. She tried to move the fingers of her right hand. They twitched. A small victory. She focused on the ticking.
1, 2,
3. A metronome for the end of a world. She had been on her way to tell him. The thought surfaced, a bubble rising through oil. She had been on her way to tell him yes. The rain fell harder. The ticking stopped. You are being told a story. You believe you are outside of it, a spectator to the wreckage, but you are not. You are inside the silence that follows the stop ticking. You are in the waiting. All stories of this nature are about the cost of love, but the receipts are rarely written in ink. They are written in scars, in silences, in the precise and methodical architecture of revenge. This is the story of a man who built safety for a woman, and a woman who became the blueprint for his rage. It begins here, in the rain, but the foundation was laid weeks before, in a room of glass and quiet power. 6 weeks earlier, the boardroom on the 47th floor of the Kyobo Tower was a study in weaponized minimalism. A single slab of black marble for a table, chairs that cost more than a car, and a view of the city that was itself a declaration of power. Anya was there to translate. Not words, but intent. The German engineering firm was trying to obscure a flaw in their material stress tests, burying it in dense, technical jargon. Anya's job was to make it plain. Julian sat at the head of the table, listening. He had not spoken a word in 2 hours. He was a man of extreme, unnerving composure. The only sign of any internal state was his left hand, resting out of sight below the table. With a small, folded square of paper from his pocket, he was methodically constructing a tiny, intricate paper bird. Anya spoke, her voice calm and even. The report states a tensile strength of 950 megapascals, but the third-party analysis on page 82, Appendix C, shows material fatigue after only 700. The German executive's face tightened. It was a detail buried 4 layers deep, an asterisk on a footnote. An intentional oversight. Julian looked at her then, really looked at her for the first time. He saw the quiet integrity, the fierce precision. He saw a woman who worked harder than necessary. He stopped folding the paper. The deal was dead. Later, as she packed her satchel, he approached. His shadow fell over her notes. You read the appendices, it was not a question. She looked up. It is my job to translate the entire document, not just the convenient parts. He nodded slowly. His eyes were dark, and they held the same stillness as the rest of him. I have a collection of original architectural sketches.
Le Corbusier, Con.
Would you be interested in translating the marginalia? They are difficult. Their courtship was a thing of quiet exchanges. Not flowers, but a first edition book on Japanese joinery left on her desk. Not love letters, but a perfectly translated Rilke poem she left on his. He learned her habits. The way she would trace the lip of her teacup with her forefinger when thinking. The way she tucked a stray strand of black hair behind her ear, not when it was in her way, but when a thought was complete. She learned his. The almost invisible tension in his jaw before a difficult meeting. The way he expressed affection through meticulous, architectural acts of care. He had the acoustics in her apartment redesigned, installing sound-dampening panels so the city noise would not disturb her work. He didn't ask, it was simply done. One evening, watching a film, she fell asleep on his sofa. He didn't cover her with a blanket. He sat in a chair across from her and watched her for 2 hours, watched the steady, gentle rise and fall of her chest, as if committing the rhythm to memory. When she woke, he was still there, the lamp beside him casting his face in sharp relief. He had a collection of small, folded paper objects on the table beside him. Cranes, frogs, complex geometric stars. Proof of a long and anxious vigil. "You were quiet," she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. He simply nodded, his gaze unwavering. "You were safe," this was his language. Safety was his love language. There was a dry humor between them, earned and private. Staring at a grotesque piece of public art, she'd once whispered, "The load-bearing capacity of that metaphor is questionable." He had laughed, a rare and quiet sound that seemed to surprise even him. It was a window into a closeness built on a shared appreciation for structure, for things made well. He never asked about her past. She never asked about his. Their present was a meticulously constructed space, and for a time, it felt like enough. Min saw it all. From her desk just outside his glass-walled office, she saw everything. She was Julian's executive assistant, but the title was an insult to the reality. She was his external hard drive, his memory, his operational conscience. She managed his life with a terrifying and silent precision that he relied upon completely. For 9 years, she had been the architect of his world. She curated his schedule, his investments, his diet. She knew the exact thread count of his sheets and the name of the vineyard that produced the only red wine he would drink. Her devotion was a silent, all-consuming organism. It lived in the way she arranged the pens on his desk into perfect parallel lines. It breathed in the way she could anticipate his needs before he was aware of them himself. And she saw Anya as a structural flaw, a beautiful, unpredictable variable introduced into a perfect equation. Min observed the translator with the same forensic intensity she applied to a corporate balance sheet. She noted the way Anya's presence softened the edges of him, made him less predictable. She saw the book on joinery. She saw the translated poem. She saw him smile, that rare, private smile, and felt a grief so profound it was a physical weight in her chest. It was grief for a conversation she and Julian would never have, for a future that existed only in the quiet, desperate architecture of her own heart. Her loyalty to him was a weapon, and she was beginning to understand that weapons could be aimed. One afternoon, she brought him his tea. Anya was inside his office, showing him a sketch on her tablet. Their heads were close together. Min watched the way his hand rested near Anya's, not touching, but occupying the same space. Min's own hands were perfectly steady as she set the tray down. Her expression was, as always, one of placid competence. Inside, a quiet and terrible decision was taking root. She would protect him. She would protect the world she had built for him. She would remove the flaw. "I don't like that you drive that car," he said one night. They were standing on her balcony, the cool night air a welcome contrast to the warmth of the apartment. Below them, the city was a grid of light, orderly and sprawling. Her car was a 10-year-old sedan, reliable, unremarkable. "It's fine," she said, leaning against the railing. "It has no weaknesses," he turned to her, his expression serious. "Everything has a weakness," he did not say more. 2 days later, a new car was delivered to her building. A black Genesis G90. It was not flashy. It was a fortress. It had 10 airbags, a forward collision avoidance system that could detect pedestrians, a frame of advanced high-strength steel. It was the automotive equivalent of the way he watched her sleep. It was an architectural gesture. She called him. "This is too much." There was a pause on the line. "Is it safe?" he asked. She knew it was not a question about the car. It was a question about her, about them, about whether she could accept this kind of deliberate, overwhelming care. "Yes," she whispered. That weekend, he had the car taken to his own security depot. "A final check," he'd explained. "My people are more thorough." He trusted no one. It was his greatest strength, and it was his greatest vulnerability, because he trusted men. She was the one who scheduled the transport. She was the one who spoke to the head of his security team. And she was the one who, citing a special request from Julian for a new telematics diagnostics unit, authorized a third-party technician for a 15-minute window of access. The technician installed a small, dormant device on the car's combust system. A ghost in the machine. A quiet, precise error waiting for a signal. A weaponized piece of loyalty. Min filed the work order under a scrambled project code, a digital needle in a haystack of data. Her work was, as always, flawless. 14 days later.
11 a.m. Anya emails Julian.
The subject is blank. The body contains a single image, a digital rendering of a small, beautiful, impossibly complex house she has designed. It is for them. There is no note. None is needed. 1:17 p.m. Julian replies. His email is also blank. The attachment is a single audio file, the sound of a key turning in a lock. It is the sound of a promise. 3:45 p.m. Min monitors Julian's calendar. He has cleared his evening. The entry simply reads, Anya. She feels a cold, clear certainty settle in her bones. The time has come. 6:12 p.m. Anya gets in her car. The black Genesis. She is heading to his apartment. She is going to tell him yes. Not to a question he has asked, but to the one he has been building for weeks. Yes to the safety. Yes to the quiet.
Yes.
6:28 p.m. On the Hannam Bridge, traffic is heavy. Rain begins to fall. Min, sitting at her desk in the empty, silent office, types a single command line into a terminal window on her computer. The command is routed through 3 encrypted servers before it becomes a simple radio signal, broadcast from a discrete antenna on the roof of their building. 6:29 p.m. The device on Anya's car receives the signal. It sends a single, corrupt data packet into the vehicle's central computer. It is not an explosion. It is a whisper. It tells the traction control system that the car is skidding on ice. It tells the engine control unit to cut power. It tells the electronic steering to lock. For one catastrophic second, the car's brain believes it is in a blizzard on a frozen lake, not on a rain-slicked bridge in Seoul. The fortress becomes a cage. The car veers sharply, silently. It does not screech. It simply moves, a marionette with its strings cut, into the path of an oncoming truck. The architectural marvel of safety, undone by a single, perfectly placed lie. The call came at 6:37 p.m. Julian was standing by the window of his apartment, watching the rain, waiting for her. He did not recognize the number. He answered. A voice, official and detached, spoke of a traffic incident on the Hannam Bridge, of a black Genesis, of a woman. The world did not spin. It did not fade to black. It simply stopped. The sound of the rain, the light from the city, the air in his lungs, it all ceased to have meaning. He was at the hospital in 11 minutes. A lifetime. He stood in the stark, white corridor under the merciless fluorescent lights, and he waited. Nurses and doctors moved around him, a tide of quiet urgency. He was a statue in the center of it. He reached into his pocket, and his fingers found a small, folded piece of paper. He did not remember putting it there. He pulled it out, a half-finished crane. He began to unfold it, smoothing out the creases with his thumb, then folding it back again. Unfold. Fold. Unfold. Fold. The simple, repetitive motion was the only thing holding the world together. A doctor finally approached him, a kind man with tired eyes. He spoke in low, measured tones. He used words like polytrauma, cranial swelling, uncertain prognosis. Then he said the words that broke the stillness. She is in a coma. We have to wait for the swelling in her brain to go down. At this stage, it is very difficult to say. Julian looked at the doctor, his expression unreadable. Nobody walks away if she doesn't wake up, it was said with the quiet, devastating calm of a geological event. It was not a threat. It was a statement of fact. A promise. The doctor held his gaze for a moment, then nodded, understanding on some primal level that he was not speaking to a grieving lover, but to the epicenter of something terrible about to begin. His grief was a cold, silent engine. It did not manifest in tears or shouts, but in a terrifying, methodical clarity. While Anya lay in the silent, white room, tethered to machines that breathed for her, Julian went to war. He did not hire criminals. He did not seek violent retribution. His vengeance would be architectural. He would deconstruct the lives of those responsible, piece by piece, until nothing but dust remained. He began in her car. Not the wreckage, but a perfect digital twin of it stored on his servers. He sat in his office for 36 straight hours, fueled by nothing but black coffee and cold fury. He analyzed every line of code from the car's onboard computers, every diagnostic report from its lifetime. His team of engineers and data analysts worked in hushed reverence around him, pulling logs, cross-referencing data packets. They were looking for an anomaly, a ghost. He was looking for a signature. For 3 days, they found nothing. The car's failure appeared to be a 1 in a billion cascade of system errors. An act of God. But Julian did not believe in God. He believed in structure. On the 4th day, he found it. A single, anomalous data packet sent to the CAN bus at 6:29 p.m. It was disguised as a routine temperature reading from an external sensor, but it was corrupt. It was a lie. And it had a point of origin, a signal broadcast from a 2-kilometer radius that included their own office building. He felt no triumph, only the grim satisfaction of a confirmed hypothesis. The flaw was not in the car. It was in his own fortress. He moved from the car's data to the building's. Security logs, server access, network traffic. He was hunting for a whisper now. And he found it. A single, encrypted command line, executed by a user with the highest level of administrative access. A user who had also, 2 weeks prior, authorized a third-party technician for a 15-minute window of access to the Genesis G90 for a telematics diagnostic. The user ID was M. Cho Min. He did not summon her. The next morning, he walked to her desk outside his office. She looked up, her expression one of perfect, professional calm. He placed a single sheet of paper on her blotter. It was a printout of the access log. Her user ID was circled in red ink. He said nothing. He did not have to. He just watched her. For a moment, she held his gaze, her composure a marvel of engineering. Then he saw it. Not a collapse, but a subtle subsidence. A hairline fracture in the perfect facade. A single tear welled in her right eye, hung on the lash for a second, and fell onto the paper, smudging the red ink. She did not wipe it away. She did not speak. She did not deny it. In her silence was a confession more damning than any words. It was the silence of her 9 years of devotion. The silence of her unrequited love. The silence of her profound and terrible grief for a life she would never have. Why? He asked. His voice was quiet, a dead thing. She finally looked at him, and in her eyes, he saw not malice, but a twisted, searing form of love. She was a flaw in the design, Min whispered. He stared at her, at this woman who had built his world, and then tried to burn it down to save it.
And he felt nothing.
Just a vast, cold emptiness. He turned and walked back into his office, leaving her there with the tear-stained paper. The demolition would be silent. He began with a phone call, then another. He bought the small textile company her father had spent his life building, and he liquidated its assets. He bought the mortgage on her parents' home and foreclosed. He moved his vast portfolio out of the investment bank where her brother worked, triggering a departmental review that ended in his termination. He made sure every headhunter, every recruiter, every firm in the city received her file, flagged with a quiet, invisible warning. It was not violent. It was precise. It was architectural. He was not destroying her. He was unbuilding her. Weeks bled into a month. The city turned from the damp chill of late autumn to the brittle cold of early winter. Julian spent every night at the hospital, sitting in the chair beside her bed. He did not read. He did not work. He just watched her, his hand resting over hers, as if he could transmit his own life force through his skin. He talked to her, his voice a low murmur against the rhythmic sigh of the ventilator. He told her about his day, about the corporate takeovers, about the small, ridiculous arguments between his department heads. He told her everything he had never said before. He unfolded his life for her, crease by crease. And in the days, he was an engine of cold, methodical ruin. He had found the third-party technician Min had hired, a small-time hacker deep in debt. Julian didn't threaten him. He simply bought his debt. All of it. He owned the man's life. In exchange for his freedom, the technician gave him the names of everyone who had helped Min, everyone who had looked the other way. A chain of quiet complicity. And Julian, with chilling precision, began to break every link. A reputation ruined here. A business bankrupted there. A career silently and permanently ended. He was dismantling an invisible network of betrayal, and he did it all from his desk, with the quiet clicks of a mouse and the soft scratch of a pen on paper. One afternoon, a nurse came in to check on Anya. She saw Julian holding Anya's hand, tracing the lines on her palm with his thumb. "You work so hard for her," the nurse said, her voice gentle. Julian didn't look up.
"She worked harder," he said.
"At everything." The nurse smiled sadly and left them in the quiet of the room. He leaned close to Anya's ear. "Come back," he whispered. It was not a request. It was an instruction. It was a prayer. And then he felt it. A flicker. A tiny, almost imperceptible pressure from her fingers against his. Not a spasm. A response. He went still. He waited. And it came again. A squeeze. Fragile.
Weak.
But it was there. It was her.